Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for being here, Mr. Secretary. And speaking of humanitarian efforts, Mr. Secretary, as you're aware, Israel is our closest ally in the Middle East and has seen major violence within the region just in the past few weeks. Being a democracy surrounded by many enemies whose stated policy is the destruction of Israel, U.S. support of Israel and its right to defend itself is of vital importance. Ensuring U.S. funding does not benefit terrorist organizations is in our national security interest and a duty to our allies. With that in mind, what assurances can you give the committee that U.S. funding for humanitarian aid will not end up in the hands of Hamas or Palestinian terrorist groups?
We're determined to make sure that that's the case. And I agree with you, both in your statements about Israel, the threats that it faces, and the need to ensure that as we work to not only deal with the grave humanitarian situation in Gaza, but ultimately to reconstruct and rebuild, that any assistance provided does not wind up in the hands of Hamas or Palestinian Islamic Jihad or any other terrorist group that has vowed the destruction of Israel. Based on my conversations with Israeli leaders, I was just there, as you may know, as well as with the United Nations, the Palestinian Authority, the Egyptians, and others, all of whom have an interest in seeing Gaza rebuilt. We believe that we can put in place the right process, the right mechanism, the right oversight to ensure that funds used to rebuild, taxpayer funds in our case, would not go to Hamas. And by the way, I think it's critical for another reason. It's hard to ask other countries to make these investments as well in potentially rebuilding Gaza if everything that is rebuilt is going to be lost again in the future because of Hamas's actions. So I think everyone has a stake in this, and based on the conversations that I've had, I think we're convinced we can put in place the right kind of mechanism to do it.
Thank you for that answer. And also, I'm deeply concerned by President Biden's decision to eliminate Protect Life and Global Health Assistance. This life-saving policy protected taxpayer dollars from subsidizing foreign NGOs that perform or actively promote abortions overseas, such as the International Planned Parenthood and Marie Stopes International. Your budget would funnel even more taxpayer dollars to these organizations by increasing the slush fund for international family planning reproductive health by $8.7 million. Promoting abortion in poor developing nations, especially when those nations have pro-life laws in place right now, harms the most vulnerable and undermines the goodwill we seek to do with global health assistance. Do you believe it is appropriate to force the American taxpayers to fund the global abortion industry by funneling millions of dollars more to a slush fund that benefits Planned Parenthood internationally?
Senator, we take very seriously the proposition that, one, the sexual and reproductive health and rights of women and girls are key to their health and well-being, and want to make sure that the support exists to do that. As you know well, women and girls in particular have been the victims in so many different ways of COVID, of conflict, and denying access to reproductive health is only exacerbates the problem. Having said that, we also take very seriously the proposition that we are not in the business of funding internationally the provider funding abortion.
Well, that is a great concern that my state has, and I think a lot of organizations can certainly speak to that as well. And I do want to be associated with Senator Kennedy's remarks of now is the time for Americans to shine, that we have developed this vaccine in record speed that is just the most phenomenal health care that I can possibly think of, and I do want to be associated with those remarks. And the Keystone XL pipeline that's already been discussed thoroughly here already, so I just won't linger on that. But I think that we have to answer to a lot of Americans who lost their jobs because of this and the effect that it's had on this industry. And it's hard for me to go home and look at them and explain to them why that they lost their jobs. So I just wanted to make that point. Thank you
Thank you.
very much, Mr. Chairman.